Well, welcome to See Files, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. As you know, if you watched the previous video, I've started a series. It's going to be a short series, but I've started a series on talking about the logical fallacies in the argumentation that people make in defense of Darwinian evolution. And we're going to go over one of those fallacies today. And it's out of a book that I picked up at the Creation Museum in Petersburg, Kentucky. Ran by Kinham and Answers in Genesis. And it's written by Dr. Jason Lissel, a PhD in astrophysics, and by Patricia Engler. And it's called Logic and Faith, Discerning Truth in Logical Arguments. And it's a very short book. These are very short arguments that I will read to you. It's just 3 pages on this one. The first one was the fallacy of refutation, and just as a reminder, the fallacy of refutation is this. Refutation is attributing a concrete characteristic to something that is abstract. And so he talked about metaphoric language and poetry and so forth being used in a logical argument, and it confuses the argument because it's using a metaphorical term to represent a concrete concept, and that just it doesn't work. It really doesn't work. Examples of those. Creationists say the world was created supernaturally, but science says otherwise. The evidence speaks for itself. That's another one. So it's an example. Evidence doesn't speak. That's the whole point. Speak is a metaphorical term. Creationists say the world was created supernaturally, but science says otherwise. Science doesn't say anything. You see the point? It's using a metaphorical sense as if science spoke. In Psalm chapter 8, wisdom is described as a woman, and a woman doing these magnificent things. And it's metaphorical language that works. That's fine. In poetry, in descriptive language, but when it comes to logical arguments, that doesn't work. The fallacy today in this video is the fallacy of equivocation. It's also by Dr. Jason Lissel. And just to remind you who he is, Dr. Jason Lissel is a Christian astrophysicist who researches issues pertaining to science and the Christian faith. Lissel earned a PhD in astrophysics at the University of Colorado in Boulder. Dr. Lissel has worked at Answers in Genesis and the Institute for Creation Research and is the founder of the Biblical Science Institute. So I'll read to you the fallacy of equivocation. When debating any topic, it's important that we pay close attention to the meaning of words and how they're being used in the debate. Most words have more than one meaning, but only one of these meanings will try it again, probably, let me try this again. Most words have more than one meaning, but only one of these meanings will properly fit the given context. I'm sorry, I don't know why I couldn't say the word properly. I don't know what was going on with that. All right. When someone shifts from one meaning of a word to another within an argument, he or she has committed a fallacy of equivocation. Here is a fictitious example. Doctors know a lot about medicine, and Dr. Lisley is a doctor, so he must know a lot about medicine. This short argument shifts from one meaning of the word doctor, medical doctor, to another, PhD, making the argument fallacious. This use of equivocation is sometimes called a bait and switch. fallacy because the listener is baited on one meaning of a word and then the meaning is switched to draw a faulty conclusion. Evolutionists often commit the fallacy of equivocation on the word evolution. This word has a number of meanings. Did you know that evolution has more than one meaning? Evolution can mean change in a general sense, but it can also refer to the idea that organisms share a common ancestor. Either meaning is perfectly legitimate, but the two meanings should not be conflated within an argument. Many evolutionists seem to think that by demonstrating evolution in the sense of change, they prove evolution in the sense of common descent. Change is not necessarily common descent. This is the argument. You might hear them say something like, creationists are wrong because we can see evolution happening all the time. Organisms are constantly changing and adapting to their environment. But of course, the fact that animals change does not demonstrate that they share a common ancestor. I cannot overstate how common this fallacy is in evolutionary arguments. Bacteria becoming resistant to antibiotics, speciation events, changes in the size and shape of finch beaks, the development of new breeds of dog, and changes in allele, it's Allele, if you want to look up the word, changes in allele frequency are all examples of change, but none of them demonstrate that the basic kinds of organisms share a common ancestor. When you hear evolutionists cite these as examples of evolution in action, you need to politely point out that they have committed the fallacy of equivocation. You might notice that at Answers in Genesis, we often use phrases like particles to people evolution. This may seem overly cumbersome, but we do this precisely to avoid equivocation. Another word on which people sometimes equivocate is the word science. Science commonly refers to the procedures by which we explore the consistent and predictable behavior of the universe today. The scientific method. This is operational science. But science can also refer to a body of knowledge. For example, the science of genetics. Furthermore, science can also refer to models regarding past events. This is origins science. Or it can refer to a specific model. When any of these meanings are switched within an argument, it is an instance of the fallacy of equivocation. Science has given us computers, medicine, the space program, and so much more. Why then do you deny the science of evolution? This is the argument. Well, this argument conflates operational science with one particular model of origin science. Origin science lacks the testable, repeatable aspects of operational science because the past can never be tested directly or repeated. Computers, medicine, and so on are all an outworking of operational science, the study of how the universe operates today. By conflating operational science with evolution, the arguer hopes to give evolution a credibility that does not truly deserve. I'll read it again. By conflating operational science with evolution, the arguer hopes to give evolution a credibility that it does not deserve. And it actually says it does not truly deserve. Yes, we do believe in operational science. And we have some respect for origin science as well. However, this does not mean that we should believe in evolution, which is only one particular model of origin science. Old Earth creationists often commit this fallacy with the word interpretation. They may say we must always compare our interpretation of Scripture with our interpretation of nature. Interpretation of Scripture means to understand the meaning of the propositional statements, to grasp the author's intention. However, nature does not have intentions. When we interpret nature, we are creating propositional statements about nature. This is very different from understanding propositional statements that someone else has already created. By conflating these two meanings of interpretation, the old Earth creationist places scientists' statements about nature on the same level as Scripture. And of course, as a Christian, I would believe that the testimony of God in Scripture is superior to the observational science of human beings. And the reason is because God is superior to human beings. God is the term God in its definition is the highest possible being that could possibly exist. Um, the most perfect, uh, omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, infinite, eternal being that could possibly exist. That would be, by definition, God. Well, if you have that being that's giving revelation to us through his scriptures, and then you have human beings looking at the creation that he created and interpreting that creation based upon their observations, and their, in this case, would be origins science, and their personal worldview influences how they view creation. And so they come up with an origins science theory, Darwinian evolution, that is in sync with their personal worldview. Then that's what we have today with what's being taught in our education system. And that worldview does not include God, does not include a being that is higher than human beings. And so they have to come up with an origins that excludes a high being like God, and therefore it would exclude the existence of the supernatural. So this is what you would call a naturalist, or which results in secular humanism and so forth and so on. Well, there's the three questions that I always ask when it comes to that particular worldview. That particular worldview has been unable to answer sufficiently these three questions. And the three questions are this: how do you get something from nothing? How do you get order from disorder? And how do you get intelligence from non-intelligence? If we are stardust, as Carl Sagan said in his famous documentary Cosmos, then where did the stardust come from? How did it come into existence? How did the Big Bang come into existence? What caused it? Anything that begins to exist must have a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. But no scientist today would argue against the universe having a beginning. Of course, they come up with the multiverse universe theory, oscillating universes, so you end up with an infinite regress of multiverses, and that still avoids the question of beginnings, because you don't have a beginning with multiverse. But anything that begins to exist must have a cause. Well, that cause cannot be just any cause. It has to be a cause that is a superior intellect, a superior being that is capable of creating the complexity that we see in the universe. When you look at the genetic code, Bill Gates, whom I'm not a big fan of, by the way, but Bill Gates stated that it's more complex than any computer code that's ever been created. Well, you don't get that form of complexity from non-intelligence. You don't get it from blind changes. You have to have an intelligence to create that kind of thing. The irreducible complexity of certain molecular machines and DNA and RNA. There's just too much that would indicate to me that the idea of, well, there is no God and it just formed naturally. I can't fathom that because of the three questions. How does something come from nothing? How does order come from disorder? And how does intelligence come from non-intelligence? And I have the divine revelation of Scripture. The natural man doesn't understand the things of God. Those who are in their trespasses and sins don't have the capacity or capability of understanding what God revealed in the Scriptures. It's only those who God has regenerated, a supernatural act of God bringing people to Christ. Only they can understand the revelation of God concerning these things. So, yes, I believe there is a supernatural. I believe there is a God. I believe he revealed himself in nature, general revelation of God, and in his divine word, specific revelation of God, or special revelation of God, you could say. So, there's the argument of the fallacy of equivocation. Thanks for watching. I've got to get back to this call that came in. God bless. We'll see you next time on the C Files.